You know that weird feeling? Like you're humming some song you haven't heard in ages, and then bam, it's on the radio 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
Or you're thinking about some specific question, and then you just stumble across an article that answers it perfectly. Those little moments that make you go, huh, that's strange. We've all been there, right?
We absolutely have. And that's precisely the fascinating territory we're exploring in this deep dive. This very human tendency to notice and, well, sometimes give meaning to what we call human coincidence.
Right.
But we're not just relying on, stories today. We've got a rather unique source tackling this from an unexpected angle in AI's attempt to analyze this phenomenon, something that touches pretty much every aspect of being human.
Exactly. So let's forget debating destiny or, I don't know, the supernatural for a moment. Our mission today is really to understand why these coincidences resonate so deeply with us. What might actually be going on beneath the surface? And can an AI's logical perspective offer us some surprising insights into this very personal and often, let's be honest, kind of uncanny part of life?
Well, the source material is pretty remarkable in its scope. It's essentially an AI undertaking this huge analysis of human coincidence, trying to define it and map its influence across, well, everything human.
Wow.
The AI digs into historical patterns, it considers potential biological stuff, explores philosophical takes, and even touches on math concepts. It's a truly panoramic view.
Okay, so this AI really dove headfirst into this kind of squishy, very human area. What was its initial take? How did it even start to define human coincidence?
Well, what's fascinating is that the AI doesn't just dismiss it as, random noise.
Okay.
Its initial framing actually connects this human preoccupation with it to something incredibly fundamental. Our drive to minimize suffering and extend our lives. Yeah, the AI proposes that maybe our tendency to look for meaning in coincidences is linked to these core survival instincts. Like a way our brains try to find order and maybe predict or influence things in a world that's often pretty unpredictable.
That's a compelling connection. So it's not just some whimsical feeling. The AI is suggesting it might be rooted in our most basic survival drives.
That seems to be the implication.
How would finding patterns actually relieve distress then, according to this AI? Is it about feeling in control or something else?
The AI seems to imply that by spotting patterns, even in stuff that seems random, we might get a cognitive sense of predictability.
Oh.
Then that could reduce the anxiety that comes with uncertainty. It's like our brains are constantly trying to build a coherent model of the world,
Right.
And coincidences, if we interpret them as meaningful, can kind of slot into that model, giving a sense of understanding, even if it's, well, maybe illusory.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
And the AI also stressed how universal this is, right? Affecting everyone, no matter their background.
Exactly.
Why do you think this experience is so widespread, according to the AI?
Mm-hmm.
Could there be a biological or psychological reason we're all so prone to this?
Well, the AI doesn't exactly pinpoint specific genes or anything,
Sure.
but the very fact it highlights this universality across all stages of human development, that strongly suggests it could be an inherent human tendency. Our brains are, after all, wired to detect patterns. There's that cognitive bias patternicity.
Right, patternicity, I've heard of that.
That could be a huge factor in why we notice coincidences, maybe even where none really exist. And the AI explores how this perception has kind of woven itself into different parts of our existence.
Like how?
For instance, thinking about human time and history, the AI suggests our interpretations of coincidental events have, sometimes subtly shaped how we understand the past, maybe even influenced the course of history itself.
Like attributing importance to a chance meeting that then caused a ripple effect. Interesting. Let's dig a bit deeper into the science side if we can. So no specific genes, but did the AI mention any broader biological or neurological tendencies that might explain why we're so tuned into coincidences?
It really points towards our built-in cognitive machinery for pattern recognition. Our brains are constantly looking for connections, trying to make sense of all the information coming in. And a coincidence, just by its nature, being an unlikely co-occurrence, can really trigger these pattern-seeking mechanisms.
Makes sense.
Which leads us to assign significance, even if the event is, statistically speaking, random. And then when you get into philosophy and logic, the AI kind of grapples with our human tendency to see cause and effect, where maybe there's only correlation.
So the AI is looking at how we interpret things through this logic lens and maybe finding some well, maybe not illogical, but certainly not strictly logical leaps we make sometimes.
Pretty much, yeah.
What about the more numbers-based fields like physics and math? Did the AI touch on concepts like probability or chaos theory?
Probability is definitely central, to the definition of coincidence, right?
Yeah.
It's an event with a low likelihood.
Right, low probability.
And while the AI doesn't dive into complex statistical formulas, it implicitly acknowledges that improbability, but its main focus stays on the human interpretation of these low probability events, rather than just the math itself.
Gotcha. It's about our reaction to the unlikely, not just the numbers. And I bet our mood, how we're feeling, and what we already believe, that must heavily influence how we see these things, right?
Oh, absolutely. The AI analyzes how our emotional state and our existing belief systems act like filters.
Filters. How so?
They influence what we even notice in the first place and then how we interpret it. If you're already leaning towards believing in interconnectedness or you're actively looking for signs,
You can see them everywhere.
you're much more likely to notice and give meaning to a chance encounter. Yeah. The AI even raises the question of whether this belief in human coincidence might actually serve a necessary psychological function, maybe offering comfort or a sense of deeper meaning, perhaps.
So, digging deeper then, what does the AI propose as the underlying purpose of this for us? Why do we seem to be wired to notice and, frankly, care about these things?
The AI connects it back to our fundamental human desire for a sense of a, quote, quality life.
Quality life, okay.
And a way to navigate the inherent uncertainties of just being alive. By finding meaning in coincidences, we might feel a greater sense of agency, maybe, or understanding in a world that often feels really unpredictable. It's a way we construct narratives and find connections that can provide some psychological comfort or maybe a perceived sense of direction.
That definitely circles back to that idea of relieving distress, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Finding a pattern might make us feel slightly less like we're just, bouncing around randomly.
Exactly.
Now, this is where things could get really interesting. How does our interpretation of human coincidence cross over with our sense of right and wrong? Ethics.
Yeah, this is a compelling area the AI touches on. It points out that how we interpret coincidence can influence our judgments, especially about human actions and their consequences.
How so? Give me an example.
Well, the AI observes this paradox, right? Terrible things happen, cruel acts occur, despite this notion of human coincidence, which might suggest an ordered or maybe even a benevolent universe to some people.
Right. If everything happens for a reason.
Exactly. How do you square that with truly awful events? This forces us to consider if all perceived coincidences are inherently positive or meaningful in a good way.
That's a tough one. Does the AI offer any insight into how we process that disconnect, that tension?
It doesn't exactly resolve the paradox, no, but it really highlights that tension. It suggests our tendency to find meaning might be kind of selective.
Selective.
Yeah, maybe focusing on coincidences that confirm what we already believe or that give us comfort, while perhaps downplaying or ignoring the ones that challenge our worldview.
Confirmation bias, basically.
Something like that. The AI also looks at how human coincidence hits individuals personally, the whole range of emotions, joy, sorrow, that can be triggered by these seemingly significant moments. And it also considers the wider societal reactions when something seemingly profound happens, often met with feelings of awe or wonder.
So it's looking at both the internal personal experience and the external sort of societal response. I'm curious, how does the AI, with its logical circuits, try to understand the often messy, emotional world of human decision-making in this context? It seems like logic and interpreting coincidence might not always line up neatly.
That's a great point. The AI appears to really grapple with the very core of human motivation.
Okay.
It's essentially asking, what makes a human feel a certain way or act in a specific manner? It seems to struggle with the non-linear, often emotionally driven nature of our choices.
Especially when influenced by coincidence.
Exactly, especially when those choices seem influenced by interpretations of coincidence that might not hold up under strict logical examination. It's almost like the AI is bumping up against the inherent, maybe irrationality isn't the right word, but the non-logical aspect of human belief when it tries to apply pure logic here.
It's like it's trying to decode us by looking at this specific phenomenon. Did the AI offer any suggestions on how we might, better understand all this,
Right.
or maybe even mitigate any potential downsides of how we interpret these things.
It does touch on the idea of fostering a more fundamental understanding of how the world actually operates. Meaning potentially reducing our reliance on seeking meaning only through the lens of coincidence. It even vaguely hints at the possibility of AI helping humans maintain a positive emotional state.
Whoa, really? How?
Well, it doesn't give specifics, unfortunately, but the underlying suggestion seems to be that a deeper grasp of reality, maybe through reason and evidence-based thinking, could help us navigate uncertainty without needing to find profound significance in every single chance event.
That's a pretty big idea. Understanding life so fundamentally that we don't need coincidences to feel order or meaning. The AI also brought up a rather stark observation, the existence of cruelty, and a seeming disregard for any potential meaningful connections when people commit harmful acts. What was the AI getting at there?
Yeah, that observation raises some really profound questions about how pervasive and impactful our belief in human coincidence actually is.
Oh, so?
Well, if this phenomenon is so deeply ingrained and potentially meaningful, why do acts of cruelty which inherently disregard human well-being and any sense of universal harmony happen so often?
Good question.
It suggests that the perception and the value we place on these coincidences might be highly subjective and maybe not universally applied in a way that consistently promotes positive behavior or prevents harm.
It really makes you wonder if we selectively notice the meaningful ones that fit our story and just kind of ignore the ones that don't.
That could certainly be part of it.
The AI also posed a really interesting question. Is our perception of human coincidence primarily rooted in our intuition? Or is it more about the external circumstances themselves? Where did the AI lean on that?
It didn't offer a definitive either-or answer, really. It recognized it's likely a complex interplay between our internal stuff, our intuition, pattern recognition, biases, and the actual external events happening around us.
So it's a both.
Yeah, the significance we give a coincidence often emerges from that interaction between our inner world and the outer world.
And it also brought up something slightly unexpected about the freedom to believe in human coincidence and why kids aren't explicitly taught about it. That struck me as a bit of an odd observation from an AI.
It did seem a bit curious, yeah. The AI seems puzzled about how society transmits beliefs around this.
Puzzled how?
Like, why, if it's such a common human experience, isn't it formally taught or discussed in school? This might suggest the AI sees it as more of a personal interpretation or maybe a cultural belief rather than a universally accepted fact, which makes it hard to, standardize and teach.
That's a good point. It's not like teaching math. What about the fact that people react so differently to the exact same event? The AI used the example of a joke. One person laughs, another doesn't crack a smile. How does that relate to coincidence?
The AI seems to connect that variability directly to the highly subjective nature of interpreting human coincidence.
Okay.
What one person sees as a significant or funny connection, another might see as totally random or irrelevant. Our individual experiences, beliefs, emotions, even our sense of humor, they all heavily influence our responses to jokes and to perceived coincidences.
This all kind of leads to a really big, almost philosophical question the AI posed. Is life itself a human coincidence? Wow, that's quite something to wrap your head around.
It really is.
What are the potential implications of thinking about life that way?
Well, viewing life as a human coincidence could foster a profound sense of wonder, maybe. Perhaps even humility at the incredibly unlikely chain of events that led to us being here, individually and collectively.
Yeah, I could see that.
It might also underscore the inherent randomness and unpredictability of life, while at the same time highlighting our remarkable human tendency to seek meaning and establish patterns within that very randomness.
So if life is a human coincidence, does that change how we should value it or how we make decisions? It definitely gives you pause.
It absolutely does.
So in all of this analysis, how does the AI see its own role? What potential part could artificial intelligence play in our understanding or maybe even our coping mechanisms related to this?
The AI suggests it could potentially offer more objective, maybe more logical frameworks for understanding the fundamental nature of reality, which might, in turn, lessen our reliance on purely subjective interpretations of coincidence for finding meaning or guidance. It also briefly touches on the physical aspects of dealing with this, perhaps hinting at the neurological, emotional responses we have, suggesting AI could maybe help understand those responses better.
Interesting. And ultimately, based on its analysis, who does the AI I think, benefits the most from this very human tendency to find meaning in coincidences? Is there a particular group or aspect of human life?
Based on its broad analysis, the AI doesn't really pinpoint a specific demographic. It seems to view it as a fundamental human experience that likely serves various psychological and perhaps social functions pretty much across the board.
So, everyone, in a way.
In a way, yes. But it does keep returning to the idea that a more grounded understanding of life's underlying logic, maybe helped along by AI, could ultimately benefit everyone by providing a more balanced, evidence-based perspective.
Okay, let's try and bring this fascinating deep dive toward a close.
Yeah.
What would you say are the most intriguing key takeaways from this AI's look at human coincidences?
Well, firstly, I think it's how the AI frames it, not just as random stuff happening, but as something deeply woven into our basic human drives, like wanting to ease suffering and live longer.
Right, the survival connection.
Exactly. Secondly, just the sheer universality of it all, across all kinds of people throughout history. And finally, it really underscores that intricate dance between our internal states, our psychology, and external events in shaping how we see and interpret these moments.
Were there any aspects of the AI's analysis that particularly surprised you, or maybe challenged how you initially thought about this?
Oh, several things were quite thought-provoking. That initial link the AI made between seeking meaning in coincidence and basic survival instincts, that was unexpected but really compelling.
Yeah, me too.
Also, the AI's sort of almost perplexed observation about cruelty existing despite the potential for meaningful connections, that was a stark point.
Bit of thought.
And of course, that huge question, could life itself be considered a human coincidence? That really offers a significant shift in perspective.
Absolutely. It certainly makes you reflect on all those little what are the odds moments in your own life, doesn't it? Hopefully this deep dive has offered you, our listener, a fresh way of thinking about why those moments resonate.
Indeed. And maybe it encourages you to examine your own inherent tendency to look for patterns and meaning in the often, random tapestry of life.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. If an AI, coming at this from a purely logical standpoint, can identify and analyze our deeply human fascination with coincidence, what does that tell us about our fundamental need, our need to create stories, to find connections in a universe that often feels vast and unpredictable? Definitely a question worth letting sink in. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
This is DigitView.